There's news around the 49ers that feels like normal April noise. And then there's news that sounds like a real shift behind closed doors. The kind of move that can change where a season is headed. What's coming out of Santa Clara right now feels like that second kind. You've got a defense that may be getting reshaped, a quiet defensive line evaluation, a high-impact rumor hovering around the offense, and a draft projection that hits the future of Brock Purdy's protection. So subscribe to the channel and come with me, because the buzz behind the scenes is getting loud. The first thing that jumps out to me about this Jaishawn Barham visit is that it's not just about the player. It's about what this kind of visit says about the coaching staff's mindset. Because when the 49ers use one of these visits on a prospect like him, that tells you something. Barham is not the cleanest match for the old-school edge profile San Francisco usually chased for years. He brings a different mix. And that mix can be really tempting for a staff that may be thinking about creating more ways to pressure the quarterback without showing its hand before the snap. And that lines up directly with Raheem Morris and the kind of influence he can have. Barham used to be an off-ball linebacker before moving more to the edge. And you can still see that background in how he plays. He attacks the run game hard. He flies downhill. He plays with violence. He plays fast. He looks like a guy hunting the ball every snap. But once you slow it down, you also see why people don't view him as a finished product yet. He still needs edge polish. There are plays where he gets too far upfield in open space he shouldn't. There are snaps where his edge setting still looks like a guy learning the details of the job. And physically, while he's explosive and athletic, he's not built like a fully developed edge who's ready to handle every kind of Sunday matchup right now. But honestly, that's exactly why he could be so interesting for San Francisco. In Santa Clara, Barham may not need to show up as a complete answer on day one. That might not even be the plan. Maybe the idea is to bring in a pressure piece early, someone for specific situations, someone who can speed up the pocket, attack space, and then grow inside a system that knows how to use versatility instead of demanding perfection right away. When people bring up the Jalon Walker comparison, it's not about saying they're the same player at the same stage. It's about the role conversation. It's about that valuable gray area between linebacker and edge, and the upside of molding an explosive athlete who can create chaos from different spots. Then you get to the tricky part of the draft board. If a lot of projections have Barham going around pick 91, the 49ers are stuck in that familiar draft tension we all know too well. Do you wait and risk losing him? Or do you move earlier because your internal belief is stronger than the outside consensus? San Francisco picks at 58, then doesn't go again until much later. That gap matters. And if Morris really sees him as a scheme fit, as the kind of piece who can help turn this defense into something more hybrid and less predictable, then it would not be surprising at all if the Niners value Barham much higher than people on the outside expect. That kind of decision usually isn't made on stage. It starts inside the building, in the room, with real conviction that the coach knows exactly what he can get out of the player. The Rene Konga conversation doesn't come with the noise of a first-round name, and maybe that's exactly why it matters. Because this is the kind of quieter move that tells you a lot about what's really happening behind the scenes. When Chris Kusurek takes time in the final stretch of the process to evaluate a defensive tackle like this, the message isn't about headlines. It's about internal filtering. It's about the staff trying to figure out whether there's hidden value late in the draft, where getting the read wrong can hurt. Because at that point, you're not buying fame. You're buying conviction. Konga falls into that range where a lot of people see him as either a late-round pick or a priority guy right after the draft. And for the 49ers, that matters right now. This team is not walking into this draft loaded with picks. They only have 6. That changes how you look at every meeting, every phone call, every bit of late-stage contact. You don't spend time this late in the process just to spend time. You're trying to separate who can actually survive the final board, who has usable traits, who can enter a rotation and grow in a demanding environment like San Francisco. His physical profile helps explain the interest. We're talking about a near 300-pound defensive tackle who posted some eye-opening pro day numbers. A 4.79 40, strong vertical, strong broad jump, 20 reps on the bench. That doesn't automatically make someone an NFL answer. Of course not. But it changes the conversation. Because when an interior defensive lineman that size moves like that, coaches start thinking about upside, role, fit, and development. And Kusurek is not the kind of coach who only stares at box score production. He looks at burst, leverage, motor, coachability, first step reaction, the kind of aggression a player brings into contact. Konga's college production doesn't scream dominant force. What it does show is usefulness and growth. In 2025, he had 29 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, led Louisville in passes defensed, and earned second-team All-ACC honors. That's not the kind of stat line that makes fans dream by itself. But it's not empty either. It points to an active player, a guy around the ball, a guy who can get hands in passing lanes, compete in traffic, and offer a package that might turn into real rotational depth in the right hands. And this is where the bigger Santa Clara picture comes in. The 49ers already invested heavily in the defensive line in the last draft with Mykel Williams, Alfred Collins, and C.J. West. At first glance, that would make a lot of people think the room is set. But inside the building, nobody is treating the defensive line like a finished job. Not after a season where the pass rush fell way below the standard this franchise needs if it wants to start suffocating big games again. So a meeting like this could mean two things at once. Either San Francisco is mapping out cheap depth for late in the draft, or it's getting ready to move fast after the draft if Konga slips through the board. This is the kind of story that looks small from the outside. But inside the building, it may say a lot about how the Niners are trying to rebuild depth, energy, and competition in the trenches without burning premium capital where the return might not be worth it. Now the temperature changes. Because once Kyle Pitts starts getting linked to the 49ers, the conversation stops being just about need and starts becoming about offensive imagination. And I think that's what makes this so revealing. Not because somebody inside Santa Clara put up a billboard saying a big move is coming, but because this is exactly the kind of rumor that starts floating when execs, agents, and people around the league begin to wonder where an underused talent could actually come back to life. And honestly, if there's one place that can sell that idea to the football world, it's San Francisco. Pitts still carries that rare aura of a player who doesn't fit neatly into the usual boxes at his position. He's not just a line of scrimmage tight end. That was never the appeal. What made him different from the start was the mix of size, speed, range, and the ability to attack areas of the field that make defenses uncomfortable. The problem is, raw talent alone doesn't fix a career. Sometimes the fit is off. Sometimes the structure around a player never unlocks the best version of him. Sometimes a guy becomes a long-running promise instead of a true matchup nightmare. And that is exactly why this rumor gets so interesting when it touches the 49ers. Because when San Francisco's offense is working the way we know it can, it lives on distorting defensive reads. Pre-snap motion, play action, roll swaps, mismatch creation. Defenses hesitating for half a second and paying for it. Drop an athlete like Kyle Pitts into that environment, and now the conversation gets serious. You force linebackers to turn and run without comfort. You make safeties deal with size and space at the same time. You open windows in the middle of the field, and you also raise the red zone threat level with a type of target most rosters simply do not have. There's another layer to this rumor that stands out too. It fits a moment where the 49ers may be looking at their offense and asking how to become scary again without leaning on the exact same formula every time. A hybrid athlete with that kind of range can be a fine-tuning piece and an impact piece at once. He doesn't need to walk in and dominate the entire system. He just needs to show up and force defenses to rethink priorities. In a creative offense, that already changes a lot. The real question, of course, is how much of this smoke comes from actual conversations and how much comes from the natural fascination his name creates. But I'll say this much. It's one of those stories that makes sense precisely because nobody in Santa Clara thinks small when they see a weapon who can scramble the defensive map. And I want to hear from the fan base on this one. If a real opening came up to bring in Kyle Pitts, would you jump on that move immediately? Or do you think this offense needs a different kind of investment right now? The Blake Miller projection taps into a debate that is probably much more active inside the building than a lot of people realize from the outside. Because extending Trent Williams solves one immediate concern, but it does not stop the clock. If anything, it sharpens it. When a team pays to keep a leader like that for 2 more years, it is not just protecting the present. It is buying a valuable window to line up the succession plan without panicking. And that is where a name like Miller starts to make a lot of behind-the-scenes sense. This isn't the kind of pick that explodes in highlight form the second it happens. It's not the kind of projection that makes fans sprint around the house because they just got a flashy new toy for the pass rush. But contender drafting is not built on impulse alone. Sometimes it comes down to the colder, harder read. Attack the need today that hasn't turned into a full-blown public emergency yet, so it doesn't run you over tomorrow. The 49ers know that. They know it because Trent is still playing at a high level, but they also saw the physical toll of another long season. They know Brock Purdy needs stability up front. And they know there is no smooth transition from an elite left tackle if you wait until the last possible second. Blake Miller brings exactly the kind of resume that serious front offices usually love. This is not some raw athlete who's all traits and projection. This is a player with 54 starts at Clemson, a school record in snaps, real game volume, big game experience, and clear technical growth in his final year. The numbers back that up too. In 2025, he posted a strong overall grade, an even better pass blocking grade, allowed just 2 sacks, and gave up only 14 total pressures. That matters. That is the foundation of a player who comes in understanding offensive line football, angles, hands, posture, repetition, and responsibility. Now, yes, there is one real detail in the middle of all this. He played right tackle in college, so the conversation about eventually moving to the left side is not automatic. But honestly, if there is one place where that kind of transition can be handled with intelligence, patience, and elite daily guidance, it is Santa Clara. Learning behind Trent Williams is not just sitting quietly on the bench and waiting your turn. It is stepping into a high-level lab, living around one of the greatest to ever do it, and absorbing technique, body prep, and game understanding every day. What makes this projection interesting is that it shows a franchise trying to balance urgency and continuity at the same time. The pass rush needs help. The receiver room still brings questions. Other spots matter too. Even so, if San Francisco sees Blake Miller as a real answer for the future at the most delicate spot on the line, I'm not calling that a luxury pick. I'm calling it contender planning. Because great teams do not wait for the crack in the wall to show before they start reinforcing it. When you put these 4 developments together, this does not look like a team scrambling for random fixes. It looks like a franchise trying to recalibrate key pressure points without giving up its ambition. Barham hints at a defense with new ideas. Konga shows the trenches are still under the microscope, even in the less glamorous parts of the process. The Kyle Pitts rumor shows the desire to keep this offense dangerous and unpredictable. And Blake Miller represents the kind of future planning real contenders have to do before urgency turns into panic. Now I want to hear from you in the comments. Which one of these storylines impacts the future of the Niners the most? And subscribe to the channel because tomorrow we've got more hot Santa Clara intel coming.